Mr. Quick's class.
Oh, yeah. All right. All right.
I tell you what, a person who believes that this wasn't set up by our own government is an idiot.
Now, I use the word focus because I know last year you had a literature book. Yes?
Yeah.
Ah. You had, listen, Miss Noron, you had stories you had to read in that book. Yes? The first page of every story, the very first page, had a literary analysis device focus that the teacher used while going over that story. I know how the book looks. I used it long enough. Yes. So I followed the same theme with these chapters and others, and there's a focus. It is there in every, yes. Here we go. Raise your hand. Miss Anna and Mr. Abdul Rahman. I got to give her credit because she said half of it. Listen carefully. Everybody listen. You can stop looking. Here it is. Here it is. Say it very loud.
Setting in nonfiction.
Setting in nonfiction. That's our focus. Last year you probably had setting only. Maybe one, and the next day maybe you had nonfiction, the next story, I don't know. But setting in nonfiction. Why did I have to combine the two together? Because you usually don't associate setting with nonfiction. It's usually associated with fiction. So it makes it very interesting. It makes it very interesting to understand how Henry David Thoreau used setting in his nonfictional work. And how he used it. How he used it to help us understand what he's trying to say. I think more so than any other part of the book, and this is why I chose these 3 chapters, especially chapter 15. I think more so than any other part of the book, he used setting to help us. Okay, so let's read. Okay, so now we know what we're looking at or looking for as we read. Everyone read either with me, but don't talk while I'm reading. Read silently, as your elementary school teacher used to say. Okay. When the ponds were firmly frozen, they afforded not only new and shorter routes to many points. Mr. Yusuf Rafat, you can't talk today. Not today. And the 2 Omars. Okay, thank you. Only new and shorter routes to many points, but new views from their surfaces of the familiar landscape around them. When I crossed Flint's Pond after it was covered with snow, though I had often paddled about and skated over it, it was so unexpectedly wide and so strange that I could not think of nothing but Baffin's Bay. The Lincoln Hills rose up around me at the extremity of a snowy plain in which I did not remember to have stood before. And the fishermen at the indeterminable distance over the ice, moving slowly about with their wolffish dogs, passed for sealers or Eskimo, or in misty weather loomed like fabulous creatures. And I did not know whether they were giants or pygmies. Let me stop here. Miss Noron, that stereo mic is almost right on you. So they're definitely going to hear you before they hear me. And we are recording. Would you please stop talking? Okay. It's very important. Okay. I took this course when I went to lecture in Lincoln in the evening, traveling in no road and and passing no house between my own hut and the lecture room. In Goose Pond, which lay in my way, a colony of muskrats dwelt and raised their cabins high above the ice, though none could be seen abroad when I crossed it. Walden, being like the rest, usually bare of snow, or with only shallow and interrupted drifts on it, was my yard where I could walk freely. When the snow was nearly 2 feet deep on a level elsewhere, and the villagers were confined to their streets, there, far from the village street, and except at very long intervals from the jingle of sleigh bells, I slid and skated as in a vast moose yard, well trodden, overhung by oak woods and solemn pines, bent down with snow or bristling with icicles. Omar and Omar. Why y'all just determined to talk while I'm talking? The last sentence, I think more so than any other sentence in that paragraph, begins our journey into this setting. And nonfiction. That last sentence. Okay, so let me show you a picture. I want you to look at the picture, and then I want you to read the last two sentences. I said the last sentence, but I don't only want you to focus on the last sentence. I want you to focus on the last two sentences. So I'm going to give you something to take a look at. Then I want you to read those two sentences again to yourself. So, see how the snowflakes, each one individually, gathers upon the stems here. Now these aren't oak trees. These are called pine trees, right? Now when if you're looking at it, it becomes quite apparent that it's very easy for snow to collect on pine trees because of the pine needles. And when so much snow collects, it forces the branches to hang, to droop down. You see how they all drooping down? They don't droop down naturally like that. But because of the weight of the snow, they're drooping down. Yes. Okay. I call it drooping down. You can call it sagging, whatever. Icicles. These are icicles. Icicles usually form because in the daytime it gets a little warmer. The ice starts to melt a little bit. But the air is still cold. So as the drops of water drip down, oh, well, you know science. Okay, I ain't your science teacher. Ask your science teacher about icicles. Okay, all right, more pines. But I guess pines will be a much, I guess, a really good example of icicles because of the drooping nature of the branch, gravity pulls the water down. Okay, so you get the basic idea, and some more, and back to that. Would you read those last two lines again for me? I will remove the pictures. Okay. All right. Without the picture, would you have had an image in your mind of what those pictures look like? You think? Huh? Yes, I think so. Let me read that last sentence again. Therefore, from the village street, and except at very long intervals from the jingle of sleigh bells, I slid and skated as in a vast moose yard, well trodden, overhung by oak woods and solemn pines bent down with snow are bristling with icicles. Because this is what happens. This is the winter time. Remember, this is the winter time. Now, maybe had this been in the summer months and he was talking about that, you wouldn't be able to make the connection. And obviously, he probably wouldn't be describing something he was seeing if it was the summertime. But obviously, he is using what he is seeing, and he's trying to convey that. So for those who don't quite understand, have never seen pine trees in the wintertime. So I think even without the pictures, we could. Of course, the pictures show better, but his description of what he's seeing. Obviously, what he's seeing is his setting. So let's see if he does that more in these next few paragraphs here. Listen carefully, please. Miss Red group, could you stop? For sounds in winter night, and often in winter days, I heard the forlorn but melodious note of a hooting owl, indefinitely far. Painting here. Does it look? Does it? Well, I didn't paint it, but does it look real? That's the question. Because that's, every artist wants their, artwork to be lifelike. Yes.
Looks hyper realistic.
It looks realistic?
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. It looks realistic. Okay, so, but, do you feel like when you look at it, you feel like it's like a window there and there?
Well, with the border.
Well, the goal of every artist is to make the art lifelike, to make you feel like you're there when you're looking. To make it not just seem dead and flat and not real. The goal of most artists is to make the artwork come to life when you look at it. In drawing and in writing, if we could please open up chapter 15, please. In drawing and in writing. Henry David Thoreau, no different in his artistic endeavors or artistic goals, because he is an artist, but he doesn't paint, he writes, bringing us to our focus. What is our focus? Or what was our focus for chapters 15 through 18? Any ideas about the focus?
Setting in nonfiction.
There we go. Setting in nonfiction. That's what you were supposed to keep in mind while reading, especially 15, but 16, 17, and 18 as well. Why setting in nonfiction? Let's talk about it. These, and as I said before, the order in which the book progresses is not the days in which he was there on the pond. Not even necessarily the months. The focus was on the seasons. And we've already went through the summer. We've already went through the fall. Now we're in the winter. Obviously, the winter is going to be different than the summer was, or even different than the fall was, for obvious reasons. So let's start chapter 15, and maybe we can talk about the obvious reasons why it wouldn't be the same. Okay, so he gives us some really, he begins with his whole setting up the setting for us. Okay, so let's continue. Next paragraph here. We'll call this a transitional paragraph, transitioning us more into his use of setting. For sounds in winter nights, and often in winter days, I heard the forlorn but melodious note of a hooting owl, indefinitely far. Such a sound as the frozen earth would yield if struck with a suitable plectrum. Plectrum. You should know that. Of course, you know that's the thing that you pluck the guitar strings or whatever strings. Could be something else. The very lingua vernacula of Walden Wood. Now, these two words, lingua and vernacular, very important here. Very important here. So I need for you to tell me what they mean. Miss Mina, you read it, you saw it, and of course you have a habit of looking up words that you understand. What does lingua vernacular mean? What does that mean? Miss Mina. And how does it relate to the focus and all of that? You don't have to tell me that much. Just tell me what the two words mean. It's a bird. Kind of bird. Benina melodious. It eats little rodents. Vernacular rodents.
I don't know what it means, but it's kind of bird.
It's a language.
Break it down. Lingua.
Lingua is language.
Language.
Yes.
Vernacular.
It's a tribe language.
A type of language.
It's a native language.
All right. Native language, type of language. The point being, listen carefully, please. He's implying here that Walden Woods, I'm about to close the door, I can't take noise, Walden Woods has its own, close it for me, language. And what does that ultimately imply? That's why I say it's a transition. We're about to be transitioned into another place, into another realm.
It has a life of its own.
It has a life. It's alive. The woods are alive. Why do we need to know that? Because wintertime is synonymous, listen carefully, with things being dead, things being quiet. But no. If you're in tune with nature, then you know the wintertime has its own, has its own life. Walden Woods has its own language. And that's part of the language, the lingua vernacular. Okay. All right. I didn't finish. Sorry. Of Walden Pond. And quite familiar to me at last, though I never saw the bird while it was making it. So he didn't necessarily see the bird speaking this language of Walden Pond, but he definitely heard it. Let's see if he heard anything else. I seldom open my door in a winter evening without hearing it. Whoo, 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 sounded sonorously, and the first three syllables accented somewhat like there who, there do, or sometimes hoo hoo only. One night in the beginning of winter, before the pond froze over about 9 o'clock, I was startled by the loud honking of a goose. And if you ever heard a goose honking, it is loud. It's a very loud sound. And stepping to the door, heard the sound of their wings, because they're pretty big, like the tempest in the woods. As they flew over my house, they passed over the pond toward Fairhaven, seemingly deterred from settling by my light there, Commodore honking all the while with a regular beat. Suddenly and unmistakably, suddenly an unmistakable cat owl from very near me, with the most harsh and tremendous voice I ever heard from any inhabitant of the woods, responded at regular intervals to the goose, or maybe geese, maybe it was more than one, as if determined to expose and disgrace the intruder from Hudson Bay by exhibiting a greater compass and volume of voice in a native and boo-hoo him out of Concord horizon. What do you mean by, and this is the owl talking, okay? What do you mean by alarming the citadel at this time of night consecrated to me? Do you think I am ever caught napping at such an hour, and that I have not got lungs and a larynx as well as yours? Boo-hoo! 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 He's like going off. He's like, I can be louder than you. It was the most important part of this paragraph. It was one of the most thrilling discords I have ever heard. And yet, if you had a discriminating ear, there were in it the elements of concord, such as these plains never saw nor heard. Discriminating ear. What does it mean, Mr. Well, I think anyway, but okay. Look, I'm going back to what I started the lesson with. Look at me. I'm going back to what I started the lesson with. Vocabulary. You shouldn't wait for a teacher to give you a word. You're going to have to discover words on your own from your reading. Whenever you come to a word, I don't care how busy you are, and I don't see how you would be busy while reading. Busy reading, at any rate. How busy you are, I don't care. When you come to a word you don't know, you must stop. You cannot move any further. The very lingua, vernacula. What are those two words? Okay, did you look them up? No, that's the point. Those two words are connected. Lingua, vernacula. Okay. The very lingua vernacula of Walden Wood, and quite familiar to me at last, though I never saw the bird while it was making it. The language of Walden Woods. Had you looked those two words up, you could have put both of them together and concluded that he's talking about the language of Walden Wood. But what does he create when he put those two words in that short paragraph? He is telling you that the woods are alive in the wintertime. They're alive. They have their own language. Yes. And you can hear it. So, because winter is usually associated with everything being dead, and quiet, and dark, and cold. But he's telling you, no, the woods are alive. The language of the woods, and he only gives us one so far, which is the owl that he hears in the distance. You don't know where it is, but you can hear it. Yeah, it is relatively quiet in wintertime, and that's why you can hear an owl, and you can't determine how far away the owl is. But the point being is that that is the language of the woods. So, in that paragraph, and we're going to call that a transitional paragraph, that's going to bring us into more of how the woods live. The very first discussion point I ask you is, how does the author use setting to help the reader experience life in the woods during the wintertime? I know everybody has the answer to that question. Speak up. Does everybody hear?
How does the use of setting help the reader experience life on the home during the winter months?
Okay, so there you go. All right, how does it do that? I mean, but related to ear. What do you mean by discriminating ear? A different ear? If you, I need for him to relate the meaning to ear. Okay, go ahead. Discriminating ear. If you had a different ear, maybe? Yes? Oh, excellent. Yes. Different ear. Okay, so we know that that's what it means on the surface, but what is he implying, though? Okay, what is he implying? What is, I don't want a bunch of yelled out stuff. I want you to tell me, what is he implying here? Now, I'm telling you right now, he's implying a few things. You just tell me one. What is he implying with this last line, especially the last part of that line? That dependent clause that starts with if. If you had a discriminating ear, that dependent clause, what is he implying? Yes?
He's implying that if you had a discriminating ear, it would make out like separate things, and you could make the elements conquer.
No, that's in the surface. We're still on the surface. We're still on the surface. We're still. Hold your breath and go under. Okay. All right. Okay, look, we can put his head under the water a little bit. I need deeper.
So someone that's not
What? Go.
someone that's not from Concord would not discriminate between the animals. It wouldn't not.
Okay, now, I like what she just said, but I'm gonna clean it up a little bit. Somebody who maybe, in other words, you're a reader, so you're not there. So maybe you can't really separate. Okay, all right. So I'm stretching a little bit. Okay, anybody else? Yes, yes. Listen, no, listen to me. Yes.
That one who truly loves nature and respects it can actually.
Okay, so why do you have to go to? Okay, no, he got it right. In the back, he finished it up. I don't think there's much yet. I mean, go ahead. All right, he said that he's implying that if you're not a lover of nature, naturalist, that you probably, and I'm just extending what he said, you would just hear a bunch of noise. Probably if you got up at night because of the noise, you would shut up! You're like that, you know. But because he loves nature, he heard the different sounds and all right, he was able, I'm gonna clear that. He was able to distinguish the sounds and determine that maybe, listen, that maybe they were communicating with each other. He is implying that if you are not, I'm just saying it so that you want to take some notes or whatever. He's implying that if you're not in tune with nature, if you hate nature, if you're not nature lover, you would just hear noise. You wouldn't have an ear that could distinguish between the different sounds and maybe make a relation to them. You just hear a bunch of sounds. So I would ask you to not talk, especially during the literature discussions. Red group. Red group. Okay. Now, we're trying to get serious about this discussion because I need to make a point. And the point I need to make is how the author uses setting in nonfiction. So let's take a picture. Let's take a look at this painting. Looks lifelike, looks real. It's fake. It's a fake, real painting. Okay. That's what I just think. It's. Well, how do you know it's not fake? Oh, you couldn't paint it. That's what you're saying. I mean, you know, I couldn't paint it either. I mean, you know, I got it. And how do you know it's not a real painting? How? You're such a good painter, no way that could be possible, right? Well, how do you know it's not? Well, how do you know it's not? It's in a frame. It got, I mean, you know, it has a title.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I tell you what. Okay. Okay. So I tell you what. It is actually important misuse of fact. We don't need your. I say it's a painting. You say it's a picture. Point being, we don't necessarily know, right? We don't know if it's 100%, right? Did you take the picture? Did you take the picture? No. Okay. So we don't know 100%. The point being, if this was a painting, if it is a painting, you're saying it's not, I'm saying it's whatever. This is what artists do. That's their goal when they're painting something. Well, most of them is to make it lifelike. To give the painting life. To make it look, to get the colors right and the shadows right. Anybody know anything about painting in here? That is the ultimate goal of most artists, to make it, the painting come alive. So when you see it, it's not just something dead you're looking at. It's alive. Henry David Thoreau. This was his intention, especially dealing with the winter months. He wanted them to come alive. He wanted you to experience the life of the woods during the winter.
Discriminate here. Go ahead. Something special.
Something special. Okay. Special. Special.
The difference?
If you're looking up the definition now, you defeated the entire purpose.
No, I'm not.
Okay, I just want to tell you that. Looking it up now, I mean, you know, it does help with the discussion, but but it doesn't help you. So those who have in their notes, whenever I ask a question about a word, about anything, and what we have, or what we were supposed to read, I'm definitely asking those who took notes to tell me from your notes what you have. Because I knew beforehand you wouldn't know what discriminating means. I knew it would be a new word for you. So I'm trying to see who took the responsibility, the self-discipline to write that word down and look it up. Especially because it's in such an important sentence. The last sentence, the first sentence in any paragraph, you got to understand that sentence above and beyond anything else. Why? Because it's ending something or it's starting something. This is ending something. What does it mean by discriminating ear? Yes?
Recognize the distinction.
Huh?
Recognize the distinction.
Speak up. Speak it loud. Say it loud.
Recognize the distinction of the difference.
Recognize the distinction. Yes?
Or
Or the difference. So why does he say this, though? Why does he say that? Why does he say, if you had a discriminating ear, there were in it the elements of concord, such as these planes never saw nor heard? Why does he say, if you had a discriminating ear? Why does he feel you need a discriminating ear to hear the sounds? You're right, to hear the sounds. But why does he say you would need a discriminating ear to hear the sounds? And what is he implying? So now we're getting to inference and implied meaning. Now, I know I said it before and I have to say it again as far as maybe find it very funny, but I don't. Up until this point, I assume most of you are used to reading comprehension, where basically the answer to the question is right there in the words. You don't even have to think. Unfortunately for us, the reading passages on the SAT ask us questions that force us to see things that are not there. It's called inference. What is the author implying? What is he implying? So we know he's talking about discriminating ears so you can hear these sounds, but what is he implying about people basically who don't have a discriminating ear? Because obviously if he says you have to have it, then he's implying something about the people who don't have it. What is he implying about those who don't have a discriminating ear? And that's actually the meaning you're supposed to be getting from that last sentence. And in essence, the whole paragraph. Yes. Speak up.
Like they can't hear everything like he does. They can't be able to they only know things that they see.
Okay.
Like they hear.
Okay. Okay. That's really close. I like that. Yes.
They would just take it together a little bit they ignore it.
I like that. I like that. Yes.
because all sports may sound the same, but each sport has its barely noticeable but unique sound to it.
That's kind of what you were saying? What he said is that they're kind of close. I think all three of you together, Red Group, I really wish you would tune into this. All three of you together, I think, pretty much have the answer. What he's implying about the people who don't have a discriminating ear is that they probably would be where he is, but would not detect the life of the woods, the action that's going on, what's happening. Because if you don't have a discriminating ear, then you just hear it all at once. You don't hear the geese and the owl, hear the geese and the owl, and it just sounds like a bunch of noise. You're not discriminating, saying, oh, those geese and the owl. I wonder if he's talking. This is what Henry David Thoreau, he's making connection. Because he's trying to become a part of the nature. So he's also implying that the person who does not have a discriminating ear is not trying to be a part of the nature. They just hear a bunch of noise. A bunch of birds and stuff. You say, shut up. You know what time it is? I mean, come on. It's nighttime. Y'all should be making that noise. So, the person without the discriminating ear, we can also assume that maybe that person doesn't necessarily like nature. Is not a naturalist. Is not someone who, cares about nature. The last line tells us everything we know about whether or not he feels himself different. He said, if you had a discriminating ear. So he's implying I have a discriminating ear. If you had a discriminating ear like me, you would be able to hear the relationship between the animals in these woods. That it's not just noise. That the woods are alive and they're communicating with each other. They're responding to each other. So this is how he feels. I may be more in tune to nature than others because not everyone has a discriminating ear. Everybody has ears, but not a discriminating ear, meaning that you may not be able to pick out the goose and the noise he's making and the owl and the noise he's making. Maybe you just hear them both. You get what I'm saying? Yes? Yes. Okay, so that's what we, yes.
He was like providing the reader with the information about Walden that the reader can easily get, but from personal experience.
Okay.
But Thoreau wrote this chapter to give the reader his personal experience.
Okay. And what was he trying to do with his personal experience? What was he trying to do with his personal experience? Bring it back to
the reader.
Yeah. What was he trying to do with his personal experience to the reader? What was he trying to do to the reader?
Trying to put him inside the setting.
Okay, good.
To make him live inside the book.
There you go. Okay, that's good. That's good. So, and I need you to write this down. It's a really good point. Thoreau's purpose for using setting, because I know I've said it many times before. You got to know what the purpose is of the author for what he wrote. The purpose of Thoreau's use of setting was to make the reader feel like they are in the woods with him near Walden Ponds. That was the purpose.
Can you see it again?
That was the purpose.
Can you see it again?
So Miss Salma hit it on the button. She explained. I mean, okay, maybe somebody else could have said it a little differently, but she said it very well. We have to always, whatever we read, and I already discussed this, that when you read especially a passage, you must make two determinations very quickly. One, the main idea. Two, the purpose. Why is the author writing this information? What does the author want me to get from this information? This is a constant question that you have to ask yourself while you're reading. This is being an active reader. If you're not asking yourself those two questions, then you're not reading. I mean, you're going over the words, but at the end of what you read, it means nothing. The third thing you're trying to figure out is details. You want to remember a few details. How do you learn how to write details, or how do you learn how to remember details? Take notes with what you read. I want to go back to a term that I think, I don't know if I mentioned it, but maybe I ran over it, but I want to go back to it. The lingua vernacular. So if you have the old book open, you want to go back. Lingua vernacular. And that is in what I call the transitional paragraph. That's between paragraph 1 and paragraph 2, and paragraph 3. It is in the last sentence. The very lingua vernacular of Walden Wood. And the point I made when we went over that was that he is implying that the woods has its own language, which also implies that it is alive. Okay? And of course, in the next paragraph that he just read and we covered, he actually went over the verbal part of this lingua vernacular. Okay, but as you know, when you're speaking in language, you have two aspects of language that often are very, very well connected. That is what you hear and what you see. It's called body language, which in some cases are as important as what you hear. If you don't get the body language, oftentimes you're going to misunderstand what you hear. So it's very important. So when you're talking about a lingua vernacular, a language, then of course you must understand both. Now, where he stopped, we're going to get into the other part of language that needs to be understood. Usually the red squirrel. And I want to start here. Usually the red squirrel. Wake me in the dawn, coursing over the roof and up and down the sides of the house as if sent out of the woods for this purpose. In this course of the winter, I threw out half a bushel of ears of sweet corn, which had not ripened, on the snow crust by my door, and was amused by watching the motions of various animals which were baited by it. In the twilight and the night, rabbits came regularly and made a hearty meal. All day long, the red squirrels came and went and afforded me much entertainment by their maneuvers. One would approach at first warily through the shrub oaks, running over the snow crest by fits, and starts like a leaf blown by the wind, now a few paces this way, with wonderful speed and waste of energy, making inconceivable waste with his trotters, as if it were for a wager. And now as many paces that way, but never getting on more than a half a rod at a time, and then suddenly pausing with a ludicrous expression and a gratuitous somerset, as if all eyes in the universe were eyed on him, for all the motions of a squirrel, even in the most solitary recesses of the forest, implying spectators as much as those of dancing girl, wasting more time in delay, in circumspection, than would have sufficed to walk the whole distance. I never saw one walk, and then suddenly, before you could say Jack Robinson, he would be in the top of a young pitch pine. That's fast. Winding up his clock and chiding all imaginary spectators. Okay, what does the squirrel now? He's speaking a language to Henry David Thoreau in these lines. What language is he? What is he telling Henry David Thoreau? And what is Henry David Thoreau understanding from this squirrel's body language? Now, he understood the communication between the goose and the owl. Miss Norham. Miss Norham, Miss Norham, Miss Norham. We're not going to do that. So, unless you're implying that I'm more, or I'm as boring. No, in that case, would be more boring than the video, because you actually fell asleep on me, but you didn't fall asleep on. Okay. Well, why don't you entertain us with this? What do you think the body language of the squirrel is communicating to Henry David Thoreau in these lines? We already know what the actual sounds of the goose and the owl communicated to him, because he explained it to us. But he didn't explain the body language. But I think we can. Are we intelligent enough to understand the body language of the squirrel? And what the squirrel is trying to communicate to Henry David Thoreau? What it was. I mean, you communicated body language to me by being asleep. You told me Miss Queen was born today. I'm sorry. Yes. Okay, so what body language did the squirrel communicate? Well, we can't wait because we don't have that much time.
Yes,
okay, go ahead, take it.
Okay. Wait. Okay. Okay.
You lose your spot when we tell you what usually the red squirrel. Okay.
I have it right here.
Okay.
Wait, but where did we stop?
Well, let's just say we went over enough to get an idea of the body language of the squirrel and what the squirrel was communicating to Henry David Thoreau. We got enough.
So what did you communicate?
Well, that's what I'm asking you. That's what I'm asking Okay, anyone else can chime in with your hand first. Without, okay. Anyone else can answer that question if you like. Give your, because we're talking about implying here. And the reason we're saying implying is because he didn't say it. He didn't say what the communication between him and the squirrel was. He's implying it by describing the actions of the squirrel. The body language of the squirrel. Okay, the squirrel says, I want to eat. I take that. Absolutely correct. And I didn't even look at that body language from that. I was looking at something else. So you're right. The squirrel wants to eat. That's the body language. But there's another body language. There's another thing that's being communicated from the squirrel to Henry David Thoreau. No, but that's what he said. So we can't. Yes.
I don't think that squirrels are sociable with humans.
Good. Here you go. Here's another one. Now we got two. Obviously, squirrels aren't sociable with humans. That's not, Henry David Thoreau is not the type that he usually hangs out with. Okay, and
They are almost scared of humans.
Bam! You hit the button. Here you go. This sound guy. The body language of the squirrel is that the squirrel is scared of Henry David Thoreau at this point. So Henry David Thoreau wants you to know that by describing all of the sudden actions and movements of the squirrel. And you can imagine him watching the squirrel and the squirrel telling him, I see the corn there, but I see you there. I see you there, I see the corn. I don't know what this is. I don't what you're trying to do. But I see it there. But there is a word in everything I just read that tells us exactly why this communication between the squirrel and Henry David Thoreau was taking place. There's one word. And you've seen that word before, a few times in Walden. One word in those, 10, 15 lines. One word that tells us or indicates to us what that body language between the squirrel and Henry David Thoreau could be. Baited. Baited. Yes. That's the word. Baited. What is bait? He's talked about bait before. What is bait? B-A-I-T. In Islamic school. I'll talk about tomorrow. That's rolling the hard way. We don't want to roll quite that hard. We want to get one of them little minibuses. What's up? No. And 14. What's up?
Tell you what, a person who believes that this wasn't set up by our own government is an idiot.
Everybody's gone out of their mind.
Welcome to Mr. Quick's class. Welcome, Mr. Quick's class.
Oh, yeah.